Welcome to Candidate Conversations, brought to you by DCTV. I'm Larry Brown Jr. Today I'll be talking to your candidates for delegate to the House of Representatives, mayor, chair of the DC City Council, and at-large Ward 3 and Ward 5 council members. Ahead of our conversation, candidates selected 2 topics from a list of 9. This is an opportunity to hear from the candidates ahead of the general election. This is not intended to be a debate. Candidates have an opportunity to respond for up to 2 minutes, uninterrupted, and they will not be allowed to interrupt other candidates during their response. Thank you also again for joining us, and we'll go ahead and start with introductions. We'll go ahead and start with you, Mr. Bruce Majors.
Hi, my name is Bruce Majors. I'm running as the Libertarian Party's candidate for delegate to Congress. I've been a DC resident since 1980, which is basically my entire adult life. I moved here basically before I even finished college. And I'm running because I think DC needs to be changed a lot. We're losing population. We've lost public school student enrollment. And I'm advocating that we decentralize things and move power down to the ward level and have more elected offices at a more neighborhood local level.
Thanks so much, Bruce. Let's go to you, Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton.
I'm Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton. I'm running again for delegate to the U.S. House of Representatives. I am encouraged by my work in getting the district twice through the House to become the 51st state with the passage of my 51st state bill. I am now in my in the 117th Congress, where I am in the majority, which I have racked up in 32 years in the Congress. I'm slated to become a full committee chair, which would greatly empower the District of Columbia. It would be the first time that a delegate has ever been a full committee chair. So far, I have the most votes for that office.
Thank you so much. Natale?
My name is Natale Lino-Stracuzzi. I'm a full-time adult resident of the District of Columbia. I've lived here my whole adult life. I'm 57 years old. I have a daughter. I'm running based on the fact that we're working till 70 for Social Security. Let's be realistic. In France, they voted out their president. They had to work till 62. Are we stupid? You look at most people that have wealth on TV, they die, 7 out of 10 die into their 70s. 2 out of 10 live into their 80s, and 1 of them will live into their 100s, up to 100. We need to do something about this. This is a critical factor in our lives. I'm going to have to live on Social Security. Stanford did a study. The average American lives till 80. So I'm going to croak before I get to my money and get to enjoy it. And something needs to be done about that. And as Americans, we should be outraged. I've run on the issues of statehood. I created a flag with 51 stars, where the 51st star is 1/3 bigger to symbolize and celebrate our fight to become our 51st state. I get written up in the papers whenever there's a statehood type of scenario in Congress or on the Hill, but no press about anything else, because again, it's a corrupt money that gets you elected in America. I run on those issues, and I will keep running until they remand the fact we have to work till 70. I'm sorry, it should be our decision, not our government's. And they've done this on purpose. Now we have a Part D and a Part C for healthcare when it comes to your retirement for Medicare. They're just sucking more money out of the Social Security recipients' income. It used to be you got 100% of your healthcare, then it went to 80, and now from 80, you have to pay for your Part C and D to get your prescriptions. So they're cutting out all of the things that help the working class Americans when they get to the age of retirement. And I'll keep running until something changes. And my issues, you'll be really interested in my answers on my issues today. Thank you again.
And closing us out with introductions is Mr. Nelson Raymond Snyder. Hi, Nelson.
I am Nelson Ryman Snyder, and I am the Republican candidate for delegate to the East House of Representatives from the District of Columbia. My connection with the District of Columbia goes back to my days in Pennsylvania. Growing up, when I was in high school, we had a Problems of Democracy civics course. And I chose amending the Constitution, and teachers said, oh, well, excellent. There's an amendment going through Congress to give the representative, to give the District of Columbia the vote for president. So why don't you go talk to the League of Women Voters and see maybe you could go and to the state legislature and see and testify in favor of this proposal, which I did. I talked to my state senator and representative. One was a Democrat, one a Republican. Pennsylvania became the 23rd state to approve the 23rd Amendment, so we can vote for president. I then came down here after military service and took a position with the Library of Congress. And in an interview, I mentioned this about my involvement with the 23rd Amendment. They said, oh, wonderful. You'll be the statehood. You'll be the, not statehood, but District of Columbia expert, because the one we have here is retiring. And shortly thereafter, I got a call from the chairman of the Committee on the District of Columbia, who just became chairman, Charles Diggs, and said, I want to speak to the expert on DC government. And so I went over, and that began my relationship with Charles Diggs and the district committee, and worked on the Home Rule Bill, which was enacted in 1973, giving us the vote for a city council and mayor. And this is the third time I've been running for this office. Earlier, Eleanor Holmes Norton, the delegate, and I did have some debates.
And we are at time, Mr. Ryman Snyder. Thank you so much for that. We're going to move into now our first question to the panel, and this question will be for everyone. Many of you have shared your opinions and have shared some of the bullets of your platforms in your introductions. I would love to know, what do you see as the biggest issue or problem facing the district right now, and how do you plan to tackle that? And we'll begin with you, we'll begin with you, Congresswoman.
Well, the biggest problem facing the District of Columbia is that without statehood, Republicans in Congress can and do attempt to undermine legislation in the District of Columbia. The reason that becoming the 51st state is so important to our city is that Congress could not interfere with the business of the District of Columbia. This year alone, I have had to defeat more than 60 amendments to take away the rights of the residents of the District of Columbia, or to avoid interference with the rights from Republicans in the Congress. So I want to become the 51st state so that the district can attend to its own business by itself without interference from any member of the House or Senate.
Mr. Ryman Snyder?
Yes, I think a major problem we have right now is our prison system. Our prisoners are in 19 different states across the country. Some of our women, incarcerated women, are 1,000 miles away. And the Republican presidents, two of them have offered to build a prison, build prisons here, pay for it, put it on federal land. And the local Democratic establishment says, no, we don't have room for prisons. We don't have rural areas. Eleanor Holmes Norton has said this in numerous times, as our mayors have. And so I don't understand this, why there's no outrage here about our incarcerated citizens being separated from their families and their communities thousands of miles away. And I don't hear anything about let's build prisons here and bring our prisoners home. If we're going to be a state, we have to have prisons within our borders. Every state does. And we can't ask for statehood until we have prisons here in the District of Columbia. And I see that as a major problem. And I brought it up in my running for office. And I will continue to bring it up as a citizen of this of the District of Columbia. And I just don't understand that our elected officials, including Eleanor Holmes Norton, seem quite comfortable with having our prisoners scattered around the country in federal prisons, some of them which are very, very poorly run, and our prisoners are mistreated in many cases. This has been documented, and I just don't understand the total lack of interest in this subject.
Thanks so much, Mr. Ryan. Thank you. That's time. Mr. Stracuzzi?
Well, as of now, nobody answered your question. First of all, statehood is a must for the district. And let's look at it realistically. If elected to office, first thing I would do with my cabinet and my employees and staff is put together a nationwide advertising blitz, which would go through also through the Department of Tourism, through the district, to let people know we're not a state. We need to make it an embarrassment to our country. We're the last federalized city in the world. Mexico City some years ago became part of Mexico and is no longer a federal city. We need to develop this nationwide advertising program so people know and we can preach it. On top of that, being an elected official, I would have more recourse to meet with ambassadors from other countries and see if they would sponsor us to be a state. Because again, without making it an embarrassment to our Congress and to this country, we will not become a state. And we need to work on this stronger and in a more efficient way that anybody else has ever done. Because again, when you're in that office, you have power. When I'm a regular human being, just saying this does nothing. So this is my goal and my plan to push statehood forward for the District of Columbia and become the 51st state of the United States. And hopefully my flag will be adopted with that star 1/3 bigger to symbolize our fight and what we had to do to become that 51st state. Thank you.
Finally, Mr. Majors.
DC has lots of problems, but two of the big ones are we have a dramatically rising crime rate and we have extremely expensive and scarce housing. And what's strange about that is that in the past 3 years, we've lost 50,000 people, residents have left DC. It's dropped from 705,000 to 657,000, and prices of housing are still going up. And neither of those problems, crime or expensive housing, are things that Congress is particularly uniquely contributing to. So soon we're going to be smaller than the two states that statehood activists always cite as such low population states, but they have senators. In 2 years, we're going to be smaller than Vermont. In 3 years, we're going to be smaller than Wyoming. So statehood activists are going to lose one of their arguments, which is that DC has more population than some of these small states. So I think to be a state, we need two things. We need more residents and we need more voter participation. Only 32% of registered voters in DC participated in the primaries. Muriel Bowser's being reelected by mayor with the support of 14% of the actual registered voters. I don't think we need to reward the current political class by promoting them and making them senators and governors in a state. First, we need to decentralize DC, take power away from the current political class, redirect it to elected offices for ward-based school boards, zoning boards, and above all, sheriffs, so that we can have more local solutions by actual voters, empowering the voters, not the political class, so they can do things about problems like crime and about having more abundant housing so that housing prices are not going up as much.
Thanks for that. Mr. Tracuzzi, I want to come back to you and talk about the economy. There are various conversations that are being held across the landscape in the district based on reports and research that talk about various disparities, one being the racial wealth gap in DC. How would you work to close the racial wealth gap across the district?
Well, when it comes to racial work gap, you have to look at education as the key. until we put people and put them through schools and put them into positions that they will make a fair wage and be able to live in this country at an equal pace. I mean, the minimum wage is another factor because not everybody's going to be smart enough to be able to, what's it called, get educated. You know, and I have in my thing that, you know, in America, we always take care of the two most important people in our life, which are who? Don't take care of the two most important people in our life, which are our children, the people are going to bring us where we're going, and then the elderly, the people that brought us where we're at. So I feel everything is paid for by the tax in this country, 2/3 state and federal, 1/3 city. And then they bend us over for it. Those investments should be able to pay higher dividends to our Social Security recipients. 100% of our healthcare. We man the fact we work till 65, and a child with a 3.7 to 4.0 grade point average should get a free ride on the tax rate at that state or city university. Government's already talking about how to do it, but nobody has a solution to how to do it. And this is the solution and the key. But the biggest factor is going to have to be raising the minimum wage so people can make a living and be able to afford where they live and not have to do the crime and commit the crimes and do the other things they do to try to get by. We have to be realistic and look at these factors in a real manner, because until you tackle the minimum wage and make it fair for people to make a living and can go out and make a living, and that we educate people in general that they are qualified to do what they're doing, we're going to keep seeing that disparity in all races.
Mr. Majors, let's talk about education in the district. Many people are coming to the district and many people are leaving the district for various reasons. And one of the reasons is education. Many people want access to free, high quality education. What is your view, and how will you ensure free, high quality education for district students?
Well, I think that we often talk about education and we sort of start at the end of the supply chain or the pipeline and don't think so much about the beginning. And I think to get into better and better colleges, what you need is a good high school and elementary education. We know that DC has failed on that regard in many aspects. Before COVID started, there was a whole series of articles in the DCist and at WAMU about how 2 or 3 of DC's high schools were promoting people and graduating people in violation of DCPS's own rules. They were people who had over 30 unexcused absences, and DC still promoted them because I think basically DCPS had given up on them and it didn't know what to do with them. So it just graduated them, even though they basically never attended school. I think we need more and more education choice. We need more and more education on trade schools and vocational education. We need to equalize the funding, which is currently radically unequal between the voucher program, the charters, and traditional public schools. Traditional public schools get budgeted much more money per pupil than the other choices. So I think we need more equal education funding across the different ways people are educated, and we need more options, including for things like vocational and trade schools, so that people are prepared and then can go on. I think one of the great things that Eleanor actually did, and she has done several great things, although I disagree with her about lots of, is getting it so that DC students could go to other colleges and universities at the in-state tuition rate, since we don't have that many options here ourselves. And I think that should definitely be protected and maintained.
Thank you for that. Congresswoman, let's talk about transportation, specifically the expansion of bike lanes in the district. What's your view there?
Oh, I'm a strong supporter of bike lanes, if that's your question. I'm slated to become chair of the Transportation Infrastructure Committee. I would give priority to bike lanes. I already have gotten a great deal done with bike lanes. We almost have bike lanes throughout the District of Columbia. There are some parts of the District of Columbia that don't have bike lanes. Bike lanes are more and more necessary. Climate change has made automobiles what should be a last resort way to get around. Bikes would be an extraordinary replacement. DC is a small city. It is cut out to be a bike and bike lane city. It has been my priorities. It will continue to be a priority if I'm elected to the next Congress.
Thank you. Mr. Ryman Snyder, the COVID-19 has brought an influx of ups and downs for families, impacting them in various ways. Some people are finding their way out of big ticket cities like DC. How will you work to ensure that you can retain residents within the Washington, DC borders?
I think I have a very fundamental solution to this of people leaving the District of Columbia. I am for exempting the residents of the District of Columbia from paying federal income tax until we get full voting representation in the Congress of the United States, as though we were a state. I don't think we can become a state, but we can amend the Constitution to give us representation in the Congress. And that almost happened under President Eisenhower. He proposed a voting for president and being represented in Congress by voting members. He was able to get the vote for president through. And so we have that, we almost had that at that time. I am for taking up his proposal and at least trying to get a vote in the House. I think that'll help keep people here. And the city council passed a bill in 1992 saying the District of Columbia should be exempt from federal income taxation until we are represented in Congress. I support that, and I wish our elected local officials would implement that and start petitioning Congress that we be exempt from federal income taxation until we get representation. Eleanor had a bill in to do this in several Congresses, and then when Republicans took up the idea, she withdrew her bill and said it was a stunt. Well, I think we need stunts to get attention to our fact that we are not represented in Congress. And so I hope she will put that bill in again. And and I will work on the Hill to get Republicans again to support that proposal. Thank you.
Awesome. Congresswoman, would you like to respond?
I'm sorry, respond to what?
Would you like to respond to Mr. Ryman Snyder's statement? He did mention your name and the work that you've done thus far.
Yeah, I did put in a bill. I took his idea and kept it in for some time. But of course, I was not able to get it passed. In other words, I'm doing anything I can. And that idea was one that I thought I should bring forward, but I was not able to get support for it in the Congress.
Thank you. As we prepare to say farewell to the audience, this is your opportunity to be able to speak directly to voters that are still a little undecided. We've had an amazing opportunity. You've had an amazing opportunity to share, and all of you have shared some pretty profound things. I want you to fill in the blank with this prompt here, and you've got 2 minutes to respond when I call your name. You should pick me because, the prompt is you should pick me because, and we'll start with you, Mr. Majors.
You should pick me because we need to end the one-party system in DC. We have 4 parties represented here, which is great. We need voters, including voters who otherwise would normally vote Democratic, to vote for me or other people in a non-majority party, because we need to have a healthy, lively, competitive DC political process. And we know that in this race in particular, it's very likely that the incumbent will be reelected kind of just out of inertia. So we need people to vote for new parties. We also need people to vote for me because I think that really I'm the only person in the race who's proposing really new ideas, in particular, that we need to take power away from the political class in DC and give it back to the voters at a more local level. We need things to actually really change, not just tinker and propose bills in Congress. We need things to really change in DC because DC faces loss of population, terrible crime, and accelerating housing costs. Even though we're losing population, housing costs and rents are still going up. We need signals that we really want something done about that. And one signal is to vote for someone who is very different and proposing something very different. Thank you.
Mr. Stracuzzi?
You should pick me because really we haven't touched on a lot of the issues that I want to touch on.
Yeah.
One is the economy. There was no COVID relief plan set up for around the world, and really our commerce departments here and around the world failed us. Why? Because the whole start of this inflation this come into play started from the shipping company charging $30,000 a container. Our commerce departments here and around the world should have been doing something about that. And that would have been a recovery system that would have really helped us in the future. Then when you talk about clean energy, am I a scientist? No. Do I know that what's it called? What's going to happen? No. But I can tell you the earth is like our body. What you put into it is what you get out of it. And we need to look at more renewable energies. If you look at Elon Musk, he has set up energy mega packs, which store the energy and then release it out. Our power grids drop to 80%, you go to a blackout. This system wouldn't happen. When you have solar and wind, you're storing this power when it's being stored, and then at the end of the day or when it's in the peak hours, it's releasing it back out again without a drop in the power grid, which makes a big difference in the long run. So realistically, we need to start thinking about the people of this country and how we make it better. I know that renewable energies aren't going to do it now, but Germany is at 60% renewable, and it took them over 30 years to get there. We need to start coming up with solutions because I'm a realist. Realistically, we still need fossil fuels, but we can lessen our demands and make a difference. And the Statehood Green Party is the true progressive party in the District of Columbia. And we have had history with the longest elected official, Hilda Mason, elected to the DC City Council, and we can do it again. So I'm looking for the DC residents' votes and to give me that opportunity, that chance to make us that city that always speaks louder than everybody else when it comes to elections. And thank you for your time, and I look forward to your vote November 8th.
Mr. Ryman Snyder?
Yes. My first bill that I will introduce when I'm elected to this office is a bill to give us a delegate to the Senate. This has actually passed the Senate twice. It has been rejected in the House, and it actually passed the House once and then was rejected in the Senate. But I'd like to give Eleanor Holmes Norton to the Senate. I'd like her to be able to run for the Senate in her lifetime of service. And this is quite possible. I think I can get bipartisan support for this. It's had it in the past. And that'll be my first bill that I will introduce. And of course, it looks like we may have a Republican House. And I will meet with the new leadership of the committees involved with the District of Columbia and promote this issue, and also talk about them to minimize their involvement in overturning laws of the District of Columbia. The Republican Party of the District of Columbia has always opposed that, and we will continue to oppose that. We go to Congress and we talk to members about it, and we'll continue to do that. And also, I'd like to revive the Eisenhower proposal that we be represented at least in the House of Representatives by voting members. That had huge bipartisan support. It got through the Senate twice with the support of Vice President Nixon, who later became president. I also want to remind the Democratic leadership here that all the rights we've gotten have been under Republican presidents who really supported us, getting a vote for president, pushing for vote.
And that's been the time. Thanks so much, Mr. Ryman Snyder. Finally, Congresswoman, why should voters pick you?
Voters should choose me based on my record. You should not, particularly today, gamble on anything but somebody who has already shown that she can produce for the District of Columbia. Besides my record, the most important thing I bring to the district is my seniority. I've already mentioned that I am slated to become a committee chair. Seniority means everything in the Congress. And it is particularly valuable for the district, which does not have the same rights as others have. Even while in the minority, I've been able to get many measures for DC. DC TAG, tuition access grants, is an example of what I've been able to do even in the minority. Now I am in the majority, I am working to maintain the majority in the House and the Senate while we have the president in power to get even more done for the District of Columbia. This is the time to keep Eleanor Holmes Norton in the House, while with her record, she can, and her seniority, she can obtain more for the District of Columbia than anyone else. That is why voters should vote for me, as they have for the last 32 years.
To the entire panel, on behalf of the crew here at DCTV, thank you so much for joining us for today's Candidate Conversations, and we wish all of you the best of luck as you journey towards Election Day. Thank you to all of our candidates for joining us for these conversations. Early voting is already underway, and in-person voting takes place November 8th. Don't forget to cast your ballot for this year's general election. For everyone here at Candidate Conversations and at DCTV, I'm Larry Brown Jr. We'll see you next time.